The Moonlight. Today is the 28th of May, 2021. I woke up at 4 a.m. and saw the moon hung in mid-sky, lighting up the vast and tranquil landscape. The moonlight entered through the windows into my room. Tonight's moon was still full, although it seemed a little smaller than yesterday's. Last night, as I woke up and looked out the window, the moonlight was so bright that I was shocked and thought that I had slept in late, but it was only 3 a.m. Through my window, I watched the bright moon that stood as a lone celestial object suspended in hazy space. No buildings or anything else appeared in my field of vision. Even the far-away mountain range seemed to fade into the distance. It was hard to describe exactly how I felt as I silently watched nature in its glorious beauty. I sensed an impression of innocence and freshness, and felt immersed in the vastness of nature. While every soul was still immersed in the sleepy darkness, the moon alone projected its wakeful light, silently enveloping the world still bathed in darkness with its soft, gentle, and refreshing light. I suddenly remembered the Vesak moonlight many years ago and reminded myself that I need to take some pictures to mark this moment when the Vesak moonlight entered my room and gently woke me up. We all know the major events that marked the life of the Buddha during the month of Vesak. He came into this world in the middle of spring in the garden of Lumbini, attained the ultimate enlightenment on a spring night under an old tree at the edge of the forest near the Niranjana River, and entered Nibbana at Kushinaga also on a spring night. All these events occurred in the month of Vesak of the ancient Hindu calendar. Much later, Buddhists around the world decided to adopt the full moon of May as a day to commemorate and celebrate the life of the Buddha and called it Vesak Day. This year, Vesak Day falls on the 26th of May. As I watched the bright moon standing like the lone sentinel over the dark world, my mind casted back to the Buddha who alone brought his light to a world full of darkness and to a humanity deep asleep. The moon gently and unconditionally cast its light to lighten up the path of travelers stumbling their way home. Likewise, the Buddha has been casting his wisdom equally to all those fortunate enough to recognize the path followed by old masters and awaken themselves to tread it towards enlightenment. As we enjoy the Vesak moonlight, we remember the time when the great disciples of the Buddha gathered on a moonlit night in the Gosinga solitary wood to discuss the spiritual path. They asked themselves the question, what kind of bhikkhu could illuminate this solitary wood? Each took turn to expound their preferred realizations of the Dhamma. At the end, they went to the Buddha to report their discussion. The Buddha praised them and told them that they were all correct. The Buddha also contributed his own short but insightful comments, which were so remarkable in their simplicity, yet so important and practical for all of us. We can consult the great disciples' discussion and the Buddha's comment in the longer discourse at Gosinga. Each time we encounter a scene or an event in our life, we can cast our mind back to the Buddha and his congregation of disciples. Our mind will immediately fall into peacefulness. This is a Buddhist practice method called Think Buddha, Think Dhamma, Think Sangha. The term that we have translated as think comes from the Vietnamese name, itself a translation of the Pali term sati. This term has several meanings that translate into different practices. It can mean repeatedly reciting the name of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. It can also mean remembering the Buddha and the truths that he taught, i.e., the Dhamma. These two forms of practice lead to the same goal. At the very moment when we recite the name or remember the Buddha, unwholesome or evil thoughts stop. And although we are still in verbal awareness mode, mental defilements cannot arise, and unwholesome karma cannot manifest. In this way, our mind is temporarily stabilized and will gradually transform. Furthermore, the term sati also means clear awareness, which is nonverbal, bare awareness, where the mind does not contain anything but awareness, not thoughts, not reasoning, not judgment, not differentiating, not inferring. For this reason, nonverbal awareness is silent, true, objective, empty, non-competing, goalless, and devoid of greed, anger, hatred, and illusion. If we pay attention to the characteristics of awareness, we will be able to find our way towards it according to our own capacity. However, if we set ourselves the goal to attain it, our awareness will no longer be objective and empty because the ego has already inserted itself into it. Our mind has become corrupted. The human mind is very subtle. We need wisdom in order to be able to investigate it, see clearly into it, and adjust it. However, we can simply set ourselves the task of observing our mind and notice when thoughts of greed, anger, hatred, delusion, or harming people arise. We can then let these evil and unwholesome thoughts go by whichever method suit us. In the two kind of thoughts sutta and how to stop thinking sutta, the Buddha taught that we need to see the harm caused by evil and unwholesome thoughts and extinguish them immediately. Alternatively, we can raise good and wholesome thoughts to balance them. We already know that a key characteristic of the human mind is that at any moment, it contains only one thought that arises, remains, extinguishes, and then is followed by another thought arising, remaining, extinguishing. From this understanding, we can purposefully raise a thought that is wholesome and useful to ourselves and others, as it will prevent any evil and unwholesome thought from arising in our mind. Once thoughts have been purified, wholesome speech and action will follow. We can see that the most praised and taught Buddhist practices, such as the Four Noble Truths, the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, the Listen, Reflect, Practice Protocol, the Contemplation, Tranquility, Stillness, Wisdom Method, or the 7 Factors of Enlightenment, all have an academic flavor that is more suited for people of higher spiritual capacity who are more inclined to study Buddhist doctrine. However, people of middle spiritual capacity like most of us can also practice Buddhism according to our own capacity. This is why I suggest that today to pay attention to the Think Buddha, Think Dhamma, Think Sangha method. Remembering the Buddha when we watch the moonlight is an example of this practice. The Buddha demonstrated extraordinary determination when he renounced his loving family, his splendid future as a king, and the life of luxury that he had been enjoying. How many people in this world would have such wisdom and resolve? When we remember the example set by the Buddha, we find greater energy to reduce our infatuation with worldly possessions and our attachment to the binds of desire and lust. When we get slandered, criticized, or insulted, we can try to remember the Buddha and his Sangha. The Buddha, his great disciples, and Sangha only wanted to awaken the people and reduce their suffering by teaching the Dhamma. Yet they still had to endure much abuse, such as when they were accused of killing people and hiding their bodies inside the Jetavana Vihara, or when they were accused of making a woman pregnant, or when thugs were hired to follow them around and insult them, etc. When we think of the injustice that the Buddha and his Sangha were subjected to despite the utmost standard of morality and conduct they upheld, the burden that we feel when we are criticized and despised will feel lighter. Furthermore, when we face the vagaries of life, we develop an understanding of the law of conflict, which is the constant companion of the worldly mind. There is always conflict and suffering in places where the worldly mind prevails. This will help us overcome our own sorrow and even develop compassion and loving kindness towards those who want us ill. When we think of the Buddha's simplicity and forbearance, of the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis' joy in living the secluded life, when we think of the deprivations that they joyfully endure and of their constant desire to offer the pure wisdom and compassion to all those who are open to receive them, evil and unwholesome phenomena will not appear in our mind. This method of spiritual practice is very simple. If we practice it constantly in our daily life, our mind is constantly pure and mental defilements will not have the room to manifest. When the hot sun shines in summer, or when the cold wind blows in winter, we can cast memory back to the Buddha and his Sangha. Not only did the Buddha spend 6 years practicing self-mortification of his body and mind, he and his Sangha also crisscrossed the country over 45 years to teach the Dhamma, traveling barefoot without head cover, walking under the hot sun or heavy rains along rough paths, and resting at midday or overnight in woods, cemeteries, caves, or under trees. When we think of the simple life led by the Buddha and his Sangha, we will find it easier to endure without complaint or hot summer sun or cold winter winds. When we remember the life of the Buddha and his Sangha and reflect on the truths that govern the world, our mind gradually becomes more at peace. We accept more easily any circumstances that happen to us and develop compassion and loving kindness towards good people and yet to be good people. Towards those who enjoy more success and happiness than us, we develop sympathetic joy, joining them in their joy without experiencing jealousy or self-pity. We gradually let go of all worldly attachments and thus attain the virtue of equanimity. By then, we have reached our destination without having to go through the forest of Buddhist knowledge, such as the teaching on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 noble truths, the 7 factors of enlightenment, the 4 steps of supernatural power, etc. Today, I would like to introduce you to this Think Buddha, Think Dhamma, Think Sangha method of practice, a very simple method that does not require stillness or wisdom. We may think of this method as a form of contemplation, observing events around us using our insightful knowledge of the life of the Buddha and his Sangha, as well as the truths that govern the world. We constantly reflect and adjust our mind so that it accords with the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Eventually, we attain stillness when our mind becomes unmoved by changes in the world, and wisdom when we face the world with an empty mind. Masters Hall, the 28th of May, 2021, Triệt Như.